everybody.
Hello there. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. Welcome to our webinar today. My name's Susie, and you're in for a real treat because you don't have to listen to me today. And instead, we've got Alex Lewis here from the Tree Health Advisory Service. So Alex is good at everything, but he has a special interest in decay fungi, so fruiting bodies and bracket fungi. And he's got a wonderful webinar for us today called Decay Fungi Rotten to the Core. And as always, I'm going to ask you to mute your phones if possible, because one, it sort of cuts down on interference at this end, and two, it stops people's pets from joining in, which is what happened in the last webinar with somebody's dog barking enthusiastically in the background. And it was lovely that the dog wanted to join in, but it was just a little bit distracting at this end. I'm going to hand over to Alex now, so thanks everybody, and I hope you enjoy this.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Susan said, I'm Alex Lewis, and I work in the Tree Health Diagnostics and Advisory Service. I'm going to give you a very, very quick overview, really, of decay fungi. Decay fungi in itself is such a large topic to cover, and there's lots of intricacies which, for the sake of what we want to do today, I just want to point out what decay fungi are and what you may see. So this is just a general overview. So what I'm going to cover today really is what are decay fungi and what types of decay you may find. There's a little bit that talks about wood anatomy as well, but you need to have that to understand the types of decay. So that would probably be the most intensive part of it. And then the rest of it is going to be sort of looking at pictures of the fruit bodies on the five hosts that you see here. So I'm focusing predominantly on ash, oak, sweet chestnut, pine and spruce. And pine and spruce are grouped together because the fungi that you tend to see are very, very similar. So I think we'll get started really. So what are decay fungi? So decay fungi are all microorganisms that have adapted to feed off wood. They are one of the only organisms that can actually sort of feed off wood, and they produce special enzymes and chemicals which break down the cells in wood. And I'll explain in the next slide what the chemical molecules are that they can break down. But what you tend to find with decay fungi is that they are part of the Mycotina group. And there's some examples here on the photos. So what we have here are three different decay fungi. So this is Prenoporia fraxinea. This one is Armillaria. I'm not quite certain of the species. And this is Ganoderma. And these are the sort of structures that you'll be seeing as part of decay fungi. They're not all like this. There are some older ones that don't produce these structures, but I'm really going to focus on the more bracket-style fruit bodies that you're seeing here. Just an interesting fact, as I said earlier, so these are sort of the only organisms that break down wood. Without these organisms, we wouldn't have the breakdown of wood material. So we would actually be covered in wood, and I think there was estimates that suggested it would be about 20 kilometers of wood, sort of high, really, of wood. So it's actually quite amazing that these organisms do this job for us, and they're sort of very essential part of the ecosystem. And what we see is the fruiting bodies. These are structures which release spores. These are a very small part of the actual organism, and the fungus itself will be living within the wood. So these are just structures that they use to sort of spread their spores to try and reproduce. Okay, so I did warn you, so this is going to be the more sort of in-depth sort of slide now. So the types of decay. So wood consists of a few different organic compounds. The key ones for us are cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. And the types of rocks that you find are very specific. So the first one I'm going to talk about is brown rocks. About 6% of decay fungi are actually brown rocks, and these tend to be more specialised to conifers but there are a few that actually sort of will decay broadleaves as well. And the reason it's called a brown rot or a cubical rot is when you look at the decay, it creates these brittle fractures that creates these cubes. And once these cubes break down even more, they turn into this powder. And they also discolour the decayed wood. And I've got examples of this in the next slide for you to sort of have a look at. The second type of rot is white rot. And this is what we tend to see on broadleaf. And with white rots, we have two different types: selective delignification and simultaneous rot. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, brown rots break down cellulose and hemicellulose initially, but the lignin remains. So the discoloration that you get from the wood is actually sort of the modified lignin, whereas the white rots, they will break down all the lignin, the cellulose, hemicellulose, or in the case of selective delignification, they focus specifically on lignin first, and then latterly on cellulose and hemicellulose. There's another type of decay called soft rots, but for the sake to make this sort of an easier sort of presentation, I'm just going to stick to these two types of rot. And it's easier to show you what the types of rots are. So firstly, I'm going to show you a brown rot. So this is type of rot that's caused by the fungus Phaeolus schreinitzii. I will talk about this later on. But what you can see is you have the discoloured heartwood, and you have these cubes that have been produced as the wood has degraded. And in this failed tree, what you see is the sort of larger cubes that have been formed. And it's a little bit difficult to try and see if there's actually discoloration here, but that's what happens within the tree. So that's the brown rot. And then on the next slide is white rots. And this is just an example of the type of rot that you would see. So we have broadleaf and conifers on this, whereas brown rot was more conifers. So this is a hemlock, and this is decay caused by Ganoderma. This is a London plane that has decay caused by Formitiporia. And then this decay is caused by a fungus, Kretschmaria juicer. But I'm not going to talk about that one. That's a bit more sort of along the lines of soft rot. But I'd rather sort of steer away from that because it has a more difficult life cycle to sort of describe. So that's really sort of the types of decay. So this is kind of the main part of the presentation. It's actually looking at the different hosts and seeing what you might find, and also what you would find and when. So the first one I'm focusing on is ash. So on the left-hand side, we have Inonotus hispidus. So it's a very striking bracket. It has this very orange colour. It's an annual fruit body that's produced between May and it can persist to February, but after a period of time they start to degrade and become black. So what you may find is these brackets are being produced on the stem or on major branches, and the type of decay that they cause is a simultaneous white rot. So this one is predominantly found on ash, but it's found on other hosts as well, including London plane. So it's one that we see fairly frequently. And sort of towards the end of the year, sort of in the winter, what you might find is these sort of fruiting bodies that are degraded on the floor beneath the tree. And they are sort of remnants of these fruit bodies. So they're produced annually, so you might see them every year, or it could be every other year, but it's something that you might see. And early on in the year, when you see this bright orange colour, they are quite striking. So the second one I want to talk about is Prenoporia fraxinea. There's no common name for this one, but this is another one that's found predominantly on ash. This time it's mainly found around the base of the tree. It's another white rot, and the fruit bodies are perennial. So this fruit body in this stage is at its youngest, so the yellow upper surface is sort of new material being put on. What happens as they age over time, they become sort of a bluey grey colour on that upper surface whilst keeping a white underside. Also, a good characteristic of this fungus is the spores that are produced, and as you can see, just underneath the brackets here, you have really nice white sort of dusting there, and that's the spores of this fungus. So it's quite nice to sort of identify. You tend to find these towards the base of the tree, and I've seen a number of different hosts, like on London Plain, actually being buried under leaf litter as well. So they can be quite hidden. So if you suspect there's something there, you might have to dig around at the base to see. And then finally, Ganoderma. Ganoderma is a very general decay fungus. You find it on a whole number of different hosts, including conifers as well as broadleaves. It's quite a nice fruit body to identify just initially to sort of the genus where you can see the brackets. And in this case, they are really nice and brown. They're perennial, so you're going to see them all year round. And this one in particular, you can see all this brown dust around here. This is another characteristic of this fungus. It produces brown spores. So if you see that, especially when you've got multiple brackets, you will see that that is potentially Ganoderma. The Ganoderma is also another white rot, but it's a selective delignifier, so it targets the lignin first, whereas the Prenoporia is a general, it goes for everything it wants really. With Ganoderma, you can see them at the base of the tree, you can see them on the stem, but they don't tend to go too high within the canopy. So you're looking really sort of the base and the stem to see. So that's ash. So now I'm just going to focus on oak. And oak has quite a few to look out for. So again, I won't go into Ganoderma again, but there are sort of a number of species that affect oak. So we've seen this picture in the previous slide, but this is another type of Ganoderma. The next one I want to talk about is this one, Fistulina hepatica, also known as the beefsteak fungus. This is an annual fruit body, and it's found normally at the base of the tree. And I tend to see them sort of in sort of the buttresses or sort of under the roots by the base of the stem. So you might have to sort of go and sort of have a look around and see. But this fungus is actually a brown rot. So this is one that, like I was saying earlier, it's one of the unusual ones that affects broadleaf rather than conifers. As I said, annual, you'll tend to see them between August and September, so you won't necessarily see them too long. It produces these really lovely kind of fruit bodies. There are some other pictures later on which show you some more why it's called beefsteak fungus. So the next one is Grifola frondota, otherwise known as hen of the woods. It produces sort of a massively small fronds, and these are found at the base of oak trees, and it's almost exclusively on oaks. I've not found anything to suggest otherwise. So if you find something that looks like this on oak, it probably is Grifola. So Grifola is a white rotter. It produces stringy white rot. So with some white rots you have where the decayed wood is, it becomes very fibrous rather than brittle and cubical. So that's quite characteristic of this type of rot. It's normally found in the roots and the very base of the stem, so you won't see that anywhere apart from the base of the tree. And then the next one is this one. It's got a better name, a common name, which is chicken of the woods. And it's very, very striking. It's got this wonderful colour, which is why it's called Laetoporus sulphureus. What you tend to find with this, it's predominantly in the stem and in the canopy. and it causes a brown rot. It's another annual, so it will be found between May and November. But what's interesting about this one is if it persists over the winter, what you might find is the remnants of this fruit body on the ground, and it will be white in colour and have like a chalky sort of consistency. So it's quite an interesting identifying feature if you find something like that in the winter. But as I say, it's an annual, so you'll only see it during kind of summer, really. And then the final one is, it's changed its name not that long ago. It used to be Innonotus Dryodeus, but now it's Pseudo-Innonotus Dryodeus. They like to keep these things really nice and simple. But this is found at the base of oak trees, but also on the stem. It's an annual fruit body, so what you have is this yellow-white fruit body when it's first formed around May. But in the picture you can see it's got these little kind of droplets, and it's a feature of this fungus that if you see that, it's very typical of Pseudo-Innonotus. It also causes white rot, but the type of white rot is a selective delignification. Yeah, so that's oak. And then the next one's going to be sweet chestnut. And as we've had these previously, I thought I'd show you different pictures of it to show you the variety of the same fungus, really. So we have fistulina again, so beefsteak fungus. And although this is quite decayed, you can kind of see the texture of the fruit body itself. And it looks very blood red, and it has a texture almost like steak. So it's quite nice that it's called beefsteak fungus. And then these are, again, chicken of the woods. So and finally, I just want to sort of quickly go over a couple of conifers, really. As I say, they're all fairly similar. They get affected by the same sort of fungi. So what you might see are these fungi. So I'll start with Spiratus crispa, otherwise known as the cauliflower fungus. It's an annual fruit body, and you tend to see it around August to November. And actually, this picture I remember taking in November, I think. It's a brown rotter, and it rots the root and the butt of pines and spruce and other conifers as well. So they're not just specific to pine or spruce, they've got the whole host range as well. The next one is Phaeolus schreinitzii, and this is really striking actually. So this is when it's really fresh, so you see it's got a very yellow edge to the fruit body. It's also used in dyeing. It's known as a dyer's maize gill, and previously used to use the fruit body to get a dye, and it's a quite nice yellow colour. So this is another annual. Again, it's another brown rot, and it's affecting the root and the buds. And again, this is sort of very general to conifers, and the pictures previously on the type of decay from brown rot is by this fungus in particular. So it's quite interesting, that fungus in itself. And then finally, this is a very small bracket. This is Heteroptysian notum, and this is one of the main decay fungi in forestry, and it's a big concern because it causes decay in the butt logs. So it's quite commercially important, but we're aware of this fungus, and it produces these sort of brown fruit bodies with a white pore surface, and they are a white rotter, but they're another selective delignifier, so they're very specific to what they are sort of decaying. What's unusual about this one is it's also a pathogen as well, so prime pathogen, so it has the ability to kill trees outright, whereas the other fungi I've talked about they're just mainly decay on the wood. So it's quite an important issue in forestry. As I say, it's perennial, so it persists, and you might get a number of different brackets around stumps. You might not necessarily find them on living trees, but depending on sort of how infected the trees are, you may see living trees with these brackets. So that's really sort of the overview of sort of decay fungi. I think I'll sort of bring up a few points as well. So when you have decay fungi present on trees, it can be difficult to determine how extensive the decay is. And without investigating using specific tools to detect decay, you can't make the assumption that the tree is very heavily decayed or not. And also, the presence of fruiting bodies, if you have more than one, doesn't necessarily indicate there's extensive decay. So when you're concerned about decay in trees, we don't do any sort of assessments of trees for safety. But what we would suggest is speaking to a tree consultant or a tree surgeon who's qualified to carry out these kinds of safety assessments, because it's important to know the extent of the decay. They'll be able to give you management options for the tree, whether or not there needs to be sort of pruning or if the tree needs to be removed. So it's something that, as I say, we don't provide that kind of service, but we're able to identify these fungi. So if you do go on to seek advice, you have that ID for that fungus as well. I think that's about it, really. As I say, I could go on for hours about this, but this is just a quick overview of what we see. And yeah, thank you.
Oh, thanks very much, Alex. Has anybody got any questions for Alex at all?
Yeah. Hello?
Hello? Please go ahead.
I was wondering, do these fungi, do they happen at a particular stage in the life of the tree?
They can vary, really. In terms of knowing to when these things produce the actual fruit bodies, in most cases we don't really fully understand when they do it. So it's really difficult to say when they will or not. And you can get fruiting bodies on really young trees or really old trees. So it's really, really variable, and it really depends on what's going on internally with the tree.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. And do they happen because the tree, there's like a wound or something for the fruiting body to set?
Sorry, could you repeat that? It's a bit crackly.
I was just wondering whether the fungi also targeted the tree because that tree had other problems, or maybe there was a problem with the bark or a wound or something.
I didn't quite catch it, but I think, are you trying to say sort of if the trees were predisposed to some kind of stress, or? Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The way that decay fungi tend to spread is they produce these elaborate protein structures, and the spores are released. And we know from experience that the spores land on wounds, or they land on sort of open areas where they can access directly into the tree. Yeah. And with the more significant ones like Heteroptygian and honey fungus, they can take advantage of really stressed trees. So it depends on the type of fungus to how it actually goes about affecting the tree.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions out there for Alex?
Should we report them on Tree Alert if we see these fungi?
Yes. There's no harm in reporting these fungi, because it's interesting to know what is actually sort of out. And especially with these annuals, we tend to see that the annual fruit bodies, you might see them year after year after year, or do you see them sort of every couple of years? So it's really interesting to know. Send reports, and that's absolutely fine.
Right. Okay.
What we tend to do as well is there are a lot of these species that you can't differentiate sort of just by looking at photos.
Right.
So you have to actually examine sort of the sample. So if you put it in, we can discuss kind of what we can do and what we need, and we can certainly provide information on the types of decay that are caused by these fungi.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Is that okay? Are there any more questions out there?
Just one more, because it's Kath here from Ruddington in Nottingham. I've lived next door to a golf course, and they've taken me on as their kind of advisor, which is very foolish. I am only a volunteer, but they're often asking me about fungi. Basically, I think what you're saying is, interesting though these are, basically they're going to have to get arboriculturalists in to assess the safety of trees relating to this. There's no point us getting involved on the basis that there's a particular type of infection. Is that a fair summary?
It is, yes. Because we don't look at the trees individually, we can't really sort of comment about sort of the safety of the tree, and we're not sort of trained to actually carry out the type of assessment that you need to have that sort of level of information to sort of make the decisions on. So, so in cases like that, if you wanted to speak to somebody or want to speak to a trained individual, the Arboricultural Associations are very good places.
Sure. That's what I did, yeah. So it sounds like I've done the right thing. We had a really interesting fruit, a huge amount of fruit of the Meropilus giganteus, is that how you pronounce it, on beech trees? Yeah,
Myricillus.
That they were concerned about because it was huge.
Yeah, and Myricillus is a very interesting fungus because it can produce lots of fruit bodies. And actually, the title of my talk, it was a beech stump that just outside the hotel near where I live, and I've never seen so much proliferation of Myricillus giganteus on.
Oh, is that what that picture was? Good, because that was
I mean, I can show you it if you want again. It was quite exceptional. I've never seen one place have so many fruit bodies before. So so it's quite amazing. So all this brown material you can see here are just brackets of the fruit body there.
God.
They're fascinating, and I'd say the sort of detail that you can go into these. I could spend hours talking about it.
Being realistic, though, obviously we're very much being involved to help out with priority pests and diseases. Susie, is there anything that we need to be looking out for in terms of fungi that would really ring alarm bells for other pests and diseases that you need us to be reporting? Or does the fungi tend to happen after the event rather than before?
It's a very good question. In terms of sort of fungi, there's not too many that are probably significant enough to sort of cause major issue. But the one I'm currently interested in at the minute is the Heterobsidian on spruce and pine. And I'm just trying to sort of collect data on sort of what's here and what host it's on. So that for me is quite interesting to know. And because it's a forestry sort of pathogen as well, it's quite sort of important for the work that we do. So if you see things like that, let me know. But I think one of the things that I'm finding with the job is that we're starting to pick up fungi on some hosts that are not necessarily reported. So we're really keen to sort of find out what is going on out there, and if we're finding new things, it's good to know about. So just any fruit bodies will be interesting just hearing about, and we can go from there in terms of what else.
Okay. And just to clarify, one of the other callers mentioned tree alert. Should we not be reporting this through Observatree in the first instance because they're not ones that are listed as priority, or does it matter?
You can sort of post on the forum, because then I can make sure Alex will see that as a sort of a good starting point. But it's not sort of core observatory sort of for reporting, but for the forum, that's absolutely fine.
Great. Okay,
is that all right with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
This has been recorded, and it will be on the website, in due course. And if anybody thinks of any other questions, please just post it on the forum, and I'll make sure Alex gets to see it.
Lovely, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Bye.